Time now for French Connections with Florence Villeminot. Hi, Florence. Our weekly look at the intricacies of life in France. This week, we're going to explore a concept that is central to life here, laïcité. This founding pillar of the French Republic is celebrating the 120th anniversary of its signing into law. While it carries incredible symbolic weight here, it can often be misunderstood abroad as it can get kind of lost in translation.
Absolutely, Charles. And to understand France, you really do have to understand this concept that is laïcité. Now, the word laïcité comes from the Greek laikos, which means of the people, so as opposed to clergy. In English, we translate it as secularism, the separation of church and state, but France's brand of secularism, laïcité, or word du jour, is particular, exceptional, some might say, and the word secular is kind of imprecise, doesn't really capture the complexity of laïcité. Laïcité is really central to how France defined itself. It's a value so important that it's actually enshrined in the first article of the French Constitution, which we can take a look at, which says that France is an indivisible, secular, democratic, and social republic.
And to understand what laïcité is, you kind of have to understand where it comes from.
Well, French laïcité finds its roots in the 18th century philosophy of the Enlightenment, which promoted the revolutionary ideas of individual freedom and equality among citizens regardless of their background or religion. And laïcité is really central to the French national narrative about emancipation from religious influence. And in the wake of the French Revolution of 1789, there was really attempts to keep the Catholic Church, which was associated with the Ancien Régime, separate from government matters. But it didn't happen overnight. It was in 1905 that after a very heated debate in the French Parliament, this law on laïcité, secularism, was signed into law.
120 years later now, the law of 1905 is still seen as being the backbone of French secularism. People are always referring to it, but what does that actually say?
Let's take a look. Let's take a look at Article 1, which says that the Republic ensures freedom of conscience. So essentially, you're free to believe or not believe in a religion. Article 1 is often overshadowed by Article 2, which says that the Republic does not recognize, pay, or subsidize any religion. Now, this is really laïcité's DNA. The state must remain neutral, but individuals are free.
C'est la garantie de la liberté. C'est ça pour nous la laïcité. La garantie de la liberté et l'égalité devant les droits de la République.
So that's the law, but how does it play out in practice?
Well, quite simply, faith is a private matter for each individual citizen, and when it comes to the state, I guess you could say it's a no-God zone. So God and faith stay out of official state policy and government affairs, and this is very different from other countries. For instance, in the United States, even though there is a separation of church and state, many politicians wear their faith on their sleeve. You'll have prayers in Congress. The national motto in the United States is, "In God we trust." You swear on the Bible. You have none of this in France. Not only is religious conduct barred from public places in France, civil servants are expected to stay neutral with respect to religion. They are prohibited from displaying religious symbols while on the job. So those are civil servants. When it comes to people, everyday people, well, they're free to do whatever they want.
Chacun fait ce qu'il veut, tout simplement.
Il faut s'affirmer, il faut être fier de sa religion, quelle qu'elle soit.
Je pense que chacun a le droit de porter dans la rue ou n'importe où, même dans la sphère du privé, ce qui lui plaît.
So public schools, however, are another area where French laïcité is applied by law.
Certainly. And in fact, public schools have been secular since before the laïcité law. They've been secular since the Jules Ferry laws of the 1880s. And the idea was really to establish a safe zone where children are equal and free to learn regardless of their religious or social backgrounds. Now, for decades, though, religious symbols were tolerated in French public schools. But in the 1980s and 90s, there was actually a very bitter debate over the Muslim headscarf and essentially whether or not it challenged the principle of secularism in France. In 2004, Parliament weighed in and passed a very controversial law banning all conspicuous religious symbols in schools. So you can see it here. Large Christian crosses, Muslim headscarves, Sikh turbans, Jewish skull caps, or the kippah, all these were banned in the name of laïcité.
So France's strict secular laws have often sparked criticism that France is anti-religious and increasingly used to stigmatize Muslims, deepening social divides.
Absolutely, because laïcité has been invoked recently for several things. For instance, the controversial Muslim face veil ban, commonly called the burqa ban, that was in 2010, or there was a whole burkini debate on French beaches a few years ago. Laïcité came up again. So critics of state secularism say there's kind of a hypocrisy, a double standard that tends to favor France's Catholic cultural heritage. For instance, a lot of our public holidays, Easter Monday, Christmas, etc., are, they're traditionally Christian holidays. It's not unusual to see nativity scenes in public space. So people say there can be a double standard. However, 120 years after it was signed into law, opinion polls suggest that most people think that secularism is in danger in France, and there's actually overwhelming support for a government pledge to reinforce laïcité, particularly in French schools. And this feeling that laïcité is in danger has been especially strong in the wake of terrorism attacks here in France, or especially there was a brutal assassination of a teacher, Samuel Paty, in 2020, who was beheaded after giving a class on freedom of speech. And all this made people think that laïcité is in danger. So as central as it is to life in France, it's also very important to know that it's very divisive, and there are very different opinions about laïcité. Some people say that we need a more open, flexible, and tolerant laïcité that's in line with French society, that's multicultural and very different. But then people say it should actually be even stricter. And some people are even calling for it to be part of the French motto, have it be liberté, égalité, fraternité, laïcité.
Thank you so much for that, Florence Villeminot, for that look into the intricacies of French life. And that's all the time we have for today's show, but be sure to check out our previous episodes on our website, france24.com.